I've been waiting to hear about it all being finalized now for over 2 years, and I'm sure that many Brits are in the same boat. But Theresa May has softened Brexit, which was already neutered, and she will lead the UK down a path of becoming a vassal state to the EU. She's trying to align UK trading values with the same globalist group of people that the UK voted to separate from. She's trying to get the UK to share trading values with the EU. So they'd share common regulations on trade, seriously inhibiting the UK's trade freedom. One man by the name of Boris Johnson, the UK's now ex-foreign secretary, called May's Brexit proposal soft. And this comes even after May tried to discourage dissent from her ministers. As of today, Johnson has resigned. It's also worth pointing out that David Davis resigns and sparks a Tory Brexiteer rebellion that could bring down the Prime Minister. Brexit Secretary says he couldn't sell out his own country with a soft exit from EU, as 2 more ministers quit. Junior Brexit ministers Steve Baker and Suella Braverman were also reported to have quit the government. On top of this, Eurosceptics plotting against the Prime Minister earlier claimed MPs have begun sending no confidence letters, which will trigger a leadership contest if 48 are received. So clearly Brexit is not precisely what the British people thought they were voting on, even though Theresa May wants to think she chose the best Brexit for Britain. And I've considered the fact that May's party doesn't have a Commons majority, and the EU has every reason to put the screws to the UK. But this would mean that May's softer-than-soft Brexit proposal could possibly be what she saw as the most practical solution, or what she thinks will move things forward. The problem is, the UK was sold the idea of independence from the regulative standards set forth by the EU. And I'm not positive that May would actually push Brexit through how the British people want if she could. She actually ran the plan by Angela Merkel, who's the Eurofiling chief, before it was seen by her own party's MPs. And there are people in Parliament who are radical, big government advocates who praised the plan, such as Anna Soubry and the father of the house, Ken Clarke, who promised to fight against Brexit. Now today there was a live stream where Theresa May actually addressed the Commons, and she continually defended the best Brexit for Britain. And there were people who were still just complaining about the fact that the UK was even thinking of leaving the EU. Like they couldn't grasp that that was decided in 2016. The people had their vote, and I truly think a lot of that vote was based on the immigration issues at the time and even still today. And Theresa May has outright said that the UK will be setting their own border laws, which at the very least opens the door to, well, close the door on detrimental people and cultures. Her plan is also to stop sending money to the EU and to have the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice end in the UK. May also discussed negotiations with Trump on trade, security, defense, because the US is the primary defender of the UK. And on top of that, the proposal being put forward allows the UK to sign trade deals around the world, and the UK has control over the standards that it wishes to abide by, which seemingly contradicts her statement that the UK would operate under the EU's trade values. I mean, the overall vibe that I'm getting from this, and it's been stated many times, is that the goal of the Chequers Agreement concerning Brexit is to, in their eyes, protect jobs and livelihoods while allowing the UK as much freedom and sovereignty as possible. But really, it just makes the UK a subordinate state to the EU. It makes them a vassal state. I'd make an economic heavy argument as to why they're not protecting jobs or livelihood in the long run by sharing EU trade values, but it's the same kind of mentality that approves of bailouts and subsidies. People tend to think that the government needs to save certain companies or industries, but if they just got out of it altogether, in the long run, people's lives would turn out more joyous and more vigorous. It's the same thing here. In the long run, a completely sovereign UK making their own decisions in setting their own trade values will be more prosperous to do a far better job at securing people's jobs and livelihood. But another thing to consider is that we should not discount the power that the EU has in this case. Any EU member can leave, but they have to notify the European Council and then negotiate their withdrawal. They have 2 years to do it, unless everyone agrees to extend the time. And as a final slap in the face, no EU state looking to leave can take any part in the EU internal discussions about the conditions of the split. So within the rest of the EU, the country still in the EU and looking to leave cannot partake in the internal discussions. So here we are, 2 years after Brexit, and nothing major has happened. The Chequers Agreement is the soft Brexit deal that isn't as cut and dry as staunch supporters of Brexit would have liked. But looking at the setup of the Brexit deal is also pretty important here. I mean, what it seems like really happened was a full team of Remainers were assembled to pass Brexit. The prime negotiator used to be a Soviet fan, and Theresa May is seeking acceptance from massive globalists. I mean, it's taking so long, and obviously raising taxes doesn't take nearly as long, but whenever there's a push to raise taxes or increase government control just in general, it happens very quickly. There's almost no resistance to bureaucrats increasing their own power. But when you try to take it away, there's 6 miles of red tape and a process that can get dragged out seemingly endlessly. One byproduct of this seemingly endless process is massive expense by the taxpayer just to split from the EU, which can't merely be brushed aside. And there is an October deadline approaching with this Brexit agreement, so, we'll have to see what happens, even though I don't have super high hopes. But you should be praying that Brexit gets through in some form, because if it turns into something that quells the disastrous EU immigration policies, and it quells the restrictions on trade, and it puts the UK in a position to really govern themselves, then that's great, and they've achieved something miraculous. But if it fails, then you'd reach the same end that you would have reached if you never tried, which, given the EU's way of governing, could quite literally be the end. I mean, just look at the way that the euro destroys countries, and the way it falsely propped up the British pound, and the way that countries like Greece can trick the entire European Union to allow them in so they can collect bailout money from the EU. It's sickening, and I don't blame anyone in the UK for wanting out. And to add yet another hurdle to this, if Brexit gets passed, then there will be an October election, and it'll open the door for someone like Chavez praising Brexit-hating Jeremy Corbyn to swoop in and just destroy any semblance of common sense in the UK. So that's all for this video. Be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't,